topic today is one that's really interested me a lot, especially over the past couple of years, and one which is very relevant. As Brother Nas pointed out very eloquently, we live in a world of, if you like, scientific rationalism, where science is progressing and science is giving us some amazing things, amazing discoveries in the fields of biology, chemistry, physics, and so on and so forth. And we live in such times, and what's interesting is that this brings with it many other things. And one such notion or narrative that's come along in the past couple of years, or past several decades, if you like, it's gone up and down, but more recently, it's been very prevalent, and that is the idea of, well, there's two ways you can look at it. You can look at it from the perspective of it being a question, which is that, is the idea of God compatible with science? Or another way you can look at it is a narrative that's been put out, which is that, has science buried God? Or God has buried science, we don't need God anymore. Science has given us everything. It allows us to understand the world we live in. It allows us to understand and progress and develop things and so on and so forth. No more do we need God to explain things, basically, right? So what I want to do is break down this narrative and try to answer the question, right? So for those in whose minds it's a narrative, it's almost a truth, it's a belief that we don't need God because we have science, we're going to try to, inshallah, break it down, God willing. And for those in whose minds it's a question, I want to address that and really sort of not only address the question, but also give you something else to think about, other things to think about and consider when it comes to these realities. Now, let's see how this works. Just once you figure this out. I got it. Okay. I got it here, man. Right, okay, so, you got it? Yeah. Okay. Brother Nas is going to do that. Anyway, as you guys can tell, I'm not good with slides, right? I dislike slides, I don't like to use slides, but I was advised that it's very engaging and people like to see some things to keep them engaged, especially if the lecture goes over 20, 30 minutes, right? Due to attention spans. Not that I'm saying anyone here has a short attention span, but I'm just saying that it will be helpful, it'll be a bit more engaging. So basically, we're going to begin with history. I want to look into history, and I want us to really just think about certain realities, right? Because we know science is a method, or as we have it today, is something that developed throughout history, right? Initially, it was known at the time of the Greeks as natural philosophy, right? It was just an aspect of philosophy, a branch of philosophy. It further developed, and most of the developments took place, if you like, within the Islamic era, the Golden Age, if you like, as it's known, right? Muslim Spain, Islamic Spain. We had the likes of individuals such as Ibn al-Haytham, for example, the individual pictured there, who was a pioneer. He's been considered by many Western philosophers, Western academics, as one of the founding forefathers of the scientific method. He basically wrote a book on optics as one of the things he did, and he was the first individual who really brought together experimentation, calculations, mathematics, and he brought all of it together and strung it together and gave us what we pretty much use, and not much different from what we use, what we call the method today, the scientific method today. He wasn't the only individual. He wasn't an isolated individual in the Islamic world. We know through history, when we studied Islamic history, that we had the Muslims, they were engaging in philosophy, biology, chemistry, mathematics. There were great developments being made in medieval Islam, Islamic Spain. We had the likes of, for example, Jabir ibn Hayyan, a chemist from Kufa. Now he apparently was laying down the foundations of chemistry centuries before Robert Boyle emerged on the scene, basically, in other parts of Europe. We had the likes of Abbas ibn Farnas, an engineer, who was carrying out tests in flight, basically, right? We even have reports of him making contraptions and strapping himself up and going to the minarets of the mosque, top of the minarets of the mosques, and jumping off, testing out his inventions, basically. And this was centuries before Leonardo da Vinci drew his infamous painting of the ornithopter. Who's seen the ornithopter? The spiral, yeah, many people have seen it. So this was centuries before he actually drew this, and we don't hear about these people. But the reason I mention these individuals is because there's a more deeper link, and that is that these individuals were believers in God. They were people who not only believed in God, but were Muslim. And in many cases, many of these people were polymaths. They were people who studied Islam, who were experts in the field, who were scholars in their own regards. And they were also scientists par excellence. So this shows us that, at least in their eyes, there was no problem between science, the method, and the belief in God. Right? And let's give credit where credit is due. If we go to the rest of Europe, when the scientific revolution took place, we had the likes of several scientists, such as Galileo, Newton, Faraday, and so on and so forth. All of these individuals, the early pioneers of the scientific method, scientists we read about today in our textbooks, they were all believers in a creator, a cause, if you like, a power behind everything, right? Or who we call God. So we see that there was no problem as far as someone having a belief in God was concerned and someone being a scientist was concerned. They were not mutually exclusive. It wasn't that you had to have one or the other, right? And the reason I make this link is because it's very important we understand that as far as ideas and concepts are concerned, there is no problem. Or at least these individuals who did some pioneering work in the sciences had no problem in believing in God, right? And it was not a hindrance or an interference. If anything, what we're going to see by the end of this talk, inshallah, God wills, is that the belief in God, at least from the Islamic perspective, powers and drives science, if understood correctly. So we're going to move on. What I want to do today, what I want to do today is cover 5 key points. And I believe once we understand these points, we'll get a whole more holistic picture of what's going on as far as the narrative is concerned. The 5 points I want to cover is understanding the nature of God and the nature of science. Number 2, the problem of scientism. Number 3, the limits of science and the problem of induction. Number 4, the how and the why of science. And number 5, why we need God to account for science. So these are the 5 key areas I want to cover today. I'm going to try giving you, obviously it's going to be from a perspective of an introductory talk. I'm not going to go into too much detail, so it's not going to go over anyone's head. It'll be quite simple. I'll try to simplify it. If there are any questions regarding these points, we can address in the Q&A, inshallah. So these are the 5 points I'm going to cover. So we're going to look at the first one, which is understanding the nature of God and science. And we have nice, big, colorful pictures for you guys to engage yourselves with as I'm talking, just in case you get bored. So, the nature of God and the nature of science. I believe this is the most fundamental point. Because I believe once we understand the nature of God from the Islamic perspective and we understand the nature of science, what we'll see is that the idea or the notion that science has buried God or science does away with God, it breaks down, it crumbles. It has no foundation, right? Now, firstly, very simply from the Islamic perspective, we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, is unlike anything we can imagine. Okay? God says, for example, in the Quran, He says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. He's unlike anything you can imagine or comprehend. Right? He's not a part of His physical creation. According to our theology, God is not physical. God is not made up of physical parts. God is not a part of His physical creation. God created the universe, but He's not a part of His universe. Is that simple to understand? Very simple concept, right? God is not physical. He created everything that exists, but is distinct and disjoint from His creation. Okay? This is very simple. That's point number 1. Point number 2, science as a method, and this is one of the most fundamental, foundational things about science, is limited to what's observable. Okay? Very, very simple concept. Science is limited to what we call empiricism, which is the idea that we attain knowledge via our senses. So through sight, through smell, through taste, through touch. For example, Bertrand Russell, one of the most eminent philosophers of science, he says, science is an attempt to discover by means of observation and reasoning based upon it particular facts about the world. Okay, so what is he saying? Let's break down what he's saying. Essentially what he's saying is, science, what it tries to do is it tries to discover facts about the world by doing, number 1, observations, right? This is the key here. You observe. As human beings, as human agents, we observe the physical reality, we gather data, and then we reason upon the data and we come to our conclusions. Essentially, in a nutshell, this is what science is, right? So science is limited to, I want to get you guys involved. What is it limited to? Observations, right? So science is limited to what's observable. This is key, okay? Now, understanding this reality and understanding the nature of God, the reality that is God is not physical or part of His physical creation, what conclusion can we make? Really think about this for a second. What conclusion can we draw straight away? Anyone? God cannot be observed, okay. That we know that God cannot be observed physically through observation. You cannot quantify God empirically. And science is limited to what's observable. Therefore, you cannot use the scientific method to prove or disprove God's existence directly. Right? And I'm using a very careful choice of words here because I'm going to elaborate as I go along. You cannot directly prove or disprove the existence of God using the scientific method. Okay, this is something I want us all to be very clear. Because as Muslims, sometimes we make the mistake, we say, oh, I can scientifically prove God's existence, yeah? We can't. you cannot neither prove nor disprove God's existence directly using science. Indirect observations, we can ask the question, what do they point towards? And we're going to engage in this in a little while. But directly, you cannot use science as the method to disprove God's existence. Is that clear? Is everyone okay with this? Yeah? It's very, very simple, right? And the sad reality is, brothers and sisters, that there are narratives that have been created that, science disproves God, we don't need God anymore, this, that, and the other. But it's just based on our ignorance. We don't understand these basic concepts. Because once we understand these realities, the individuals who are promoting these narratives, right, that we have science, we don't need God, and so on and so forth, their arguments crumble, right? And the funny thing is, one of the biggest proponents of this idea, Richard Dawkins, for example, he says in his book, and this is one of the ironies, he says God is a scientific hypothesis. When we know God is not a scientific hypothesis. Science is limited to observation. Obviously, in his mind, he has a concept of God which may be physical or made up of parts. He had a discussion with Hamza outside one of the Atheist World Convention, and he said, God must be complex because he's made up of many parts. No, we don't believe in a God made up of parts, right? So it's his concept of God, and he's misinformed regarding the concept of God, right? And understanding this reality, we'll move on swiftly to our second point, which is basically the problem of scientism. This, I believe, is the real problem that we're facing. And this is the sly little rat that gets into the nooks and crannies, right, and steals the cheese and eats the cheese and runs away and no one knows where it's gone, yeah? This is the real problem. We don't really talk about scientism, right? So, now what I want to do is distinguish between science and scientism, okay? Now, scientism isn't a word that I've just made up and, it's a concoction of my mind and I'm just trying to label something. No, it's a real phenomenon. If people have a problem with labels, put the word aside and really try to understand what scientism is, right? Or what I call scientism or what it's defined as. Scientism is a worldview, okay? It's an idea. And the idea is very simple. Is this my word?
Yes.
Yeah, it's lovely. Scientism is an idea. It's a worldview, okay? And the idea is very simple, and that is that science is the only way to truth, or science is the only means to acquire knowledge, or something along those lines, right? Basically. Right? So the idea behind scientism, or the idea is that science is the only way we attain truth about reality, the only way to knowledge, the only way to understand things and believe in things and so on. You can rephrase that in many different ways, but that's the sort of core basic idea behind scientism, right? Science, as we've discussed briefly currently, is a method which we use as human beings. It's a neutral method, right? But scientism is an ideology, it's an idea, okay? Now, the problem of scientism is very simple, is that science can't be the only way to truth. We need to understand this. Science can't, because if you say science is the only way to truth, therefore you have to let go of many other truths, such as moral truths, logical truths, mathematical truths, right? Take mathematics, for example. Science uses mathematics, but yet you cannot justify mathematics empirically, right? You can't, for a crude example, you can't take the number 3 and ask, well, how does the number 3 taste, right? Or how does the number 2 smell? You can't empirically validate numbers or mathematics, yet we use it in science. Okay, so there's many other realities that exist which science can't prove or justify or count for. Yet we accept those realities for other reasons, okay? And that's one of the key problems of scientism, that you have to let go of other realities if you acquire or hold on to scientism. The biggest reputation of scientism, I believe, is this. It's very simple. Scientism is not a scientific claim. Okay, really think about this for a second. The claim, science is the only way to truth, cannot be justified scientifically. Look at the irony, right? Someone is claiming science is the only way to truth, right? Therefore, no other means to truth exists. So that statement itself, can you prove that scientifically? That's the challenge to anyone that claims scientism or claims science is the only way to truth. If you believe science is the only way to truth, then prove that statement, that position first scientifically. You can't. It's self-refuting. If that position is true, it's false. Right? If it's true, it's false. It breaks down. It's self-refuting. It's self-annihilating. It breaks down itself. So is everyone okay with this, right? The idea science is the only way to truth is self-refuting. It breaks down. Now, what's interesting is the idea of scientism is prevalent, right? And not only is let's put it this way. Many new atheists who are proponents of scientism, who are very anti-theism, anti-God, they will not openly come out and say, I am an individual who ascribes to scientism, right? I'm an individual who believes science is the only way to truth and there's no other way to truth and so on. Yet, this will be the underlying presuppositions. This will be the lens they see the world through, right? And we see this like in the statement of Dawkins when he says God is a scientific hypothesis. He's trying to account for God or refute God empirically. When, for example, Sam Harris, he writes an entire book on the moral landscape, called The Moral Landscape, right? On moral values and duties. How do we account for morality? And what he tries to do is, in a new sort of sense or fashion, he tries to take consequentialism, which we can discuss in Q&A, and tries to amalgamate it with science and say, look, science can tell us what moral truths are, lead us to what's true. And he has a system of peaks and troughs, what leads to human suffering and flourishing, so on and so forth. But the point being, why do they do this? This is the underlying point here. They do this because they ascribe to scientism internally. So what they want to do is they understand internally my position. I see the world through scientism. I see the world through this lens where I have to account for things or believe in things via this method. Therefore, I see that these other external realities such as morality, objective moral values and duties. Now, how do I account for them? Let me try to justify them via science, right? Therefore, you see these books being written. The same with Richard Dawkins, the same with everyone else. And the other problem is that it's not only new atheists. This problem, the problem of scientism, is very deeply rooted within normal people as well, normal theists as well. Whether they're Christian, Jews, Muslims, people of religion, people of generally of no religion. It's a lens that we've acquired through the world we live in today, right? The society we grow up in, when we go to school and we go through the educational system, we naturally are given this as an inherited gift, if you like, right? And why? I believe there's several reasons, but one reason I think which leads to this is the fact that science has given us some really amazing things, right? So we've had many progressions in the scientific method. We've had many amazing things that we've got out of science, especially in the recent few decades. We've made leaps and bounds, right, as far as science is concerned. But this now creates this idea or this notion within us that if science has given us so much already, it can give us everything, right? It can tell us about everything. But it's not true. It's the same as a simple analogy is imagine, you go to Uncle Tom, yeah? Or Uncle John, your uncle, yeah? Every weekend you go and visit your uncle. And you're struggling with your maths homework, yeah? And you go to him and say, Uncle, help me with this. And you notice that he's really good with maths. And he helps you 1 week. You go back to your teacher and you passed your test, yeah? Because your uncle helped you and he did well. You go back the second week with the next exam. And hey, again, your uncle's fantastic at maths and you pass your exam again. Or you pass your test again, your homework, right? And you do this over and over and over again. And you see your uncle's really good at maths. And whenever he helps you, you're progressing, yeah? It's really helping you. But now, is it right, therefore, that you start to think, well, you know what, my uncle's really good at maths, and whenever he helps me, I do really well. Maybe I can ask him about my English homework, right? Or maybe he's going to be as good at doing my English homework as he is doing my maths homework. Does that necessarily follow? No. But this is what happens, and I'm really trying to engage with us on an internal level now. This is what's going on within all of us, Muslim or not Muslim. We need to understand this reality because we see science working, gives us medicine and all of these things. And science, don't get me wrong, it's an amazing method, right? I love the scientific method. But I, as a Muslim at least, what I try to do is understand the context of science, the limits of science, and the scope of science, and appreciate it for what it is. And this is what we need to start to do. Don't make science more than it is. Don't turn it into an ideology, right? Science works, but it has a scope. It works on a particular level, okay? So the next point that I want to cover is the problem of induction. It's some of the limits of science, right? Because we've talked about this, and let's engage this for a little while. We know the scientific method is a great method, but it is limited, okay? I want us to understand this. And I really believe once we can understand and appreciate the limitations of this method, we can really use it to its full effect, right? Because when you really understand how something works, you can put it to use the best, yeah? For example, if you train, you go to the gym, if you really know how your body works and what exercises are good for your body, you can really apply yourself properly, right? And you don't waste time doing things which are unnecessary for you, don't work for you, yeah, or can lead to injury for you. The same way, if you understand science and its limits, where it can go and how much it can do, we can really apply it and use it and utilize it the best we can. One problem, or one limit, if you like, I've highlighted already, which is empiricism, which is that science is limited to observation. So it can only deal with what's observable, okay? Another problem of the scientific method, or one of the greatest problems, is the problem of induction, is the inductive method of reasoning, right? Now, induction, put simply, is the method of reasoning science employs, okay? The method it uses to come to its conclusions. Induction is basically when you go from a limited set of data, okay? And scientists always have a limited set of data, right? You're not going to have all the data possible always. You go from a limited set of data, And what do you do based on that data? You make a general conclusion. Okay, I want you guys to follow me. It's a bit technical, but it's very simple once we understand the basic concept. So you go from a limited set of data, and you formulate a general conclusion. Okay? Let me give you guys an example to put this into perspective. Imagine who's studying science here? Okay, I bet it's mainly engineering or doctors or... Okay, good. So some brothers and sisters, yeah? Okay. Imagine tomorrow you go into class and your teacher commissions you with a project, yeah? Says, I want you to go out onto the beach of Portsmouth for the next 6 months. I want you to sit there, right? Take your deck chair, sit there, and observe the seagulls flying over, yeah? Just count the seagulls flying over, and I want you to see the color of these seagulls, yeah? And do this for 6 months. I want you to tell me your conclusions based on what color are the seagulls that fly over the beaches of Portsmouth, okay? So as a scientist, what do? You take your notepad, probably if you're primitive, you take a piece of a pen, some paper, you go there, you sit down, maybe take a pair of binoculars, and you sit there all day and you observe the seagulls. Yeah, maybe have some fish and chips or something to go with that, but you sit there and you observe the seagulls. 6 months you do this, say you observe, I don't know, 20,000 seagulls, yeah? 50,000 seagulls. Your data will always be limited. Even if you spend your entire life observing seagulls, your data will always be limited. Now, based on your limited data of 50,000 seagulls, you make a conclusion that all the seagulls over the beaches of Portsmouth are white. Okay? Now, this is what scientists do all the time. For example, Samir Okasha, I believe, Okasha, I think his name is, in his introductory book to the philosophy of science by Oxford Press, he points out that scientists use induction all the time. Right? Science is based on induction. You can't escape this reality. You go by your limited data and you make a general conclusion. Okay? Now, what's the problem here? There's a key problem here. The problem is that you can be wrong. Okay? There's room for error. Always. Is everyone following me so far, yeah? There's always room for error. It's possible, it's very possible that someone else, say your friend is commissioned a few weeks later to go and repeat the same study and do it over a year-long period, and he may come back with different data. Because it's possible that once you stopped your study, at that point, after you observed the 50,000 seagulls, it's very possible that the next seagull was brown. It's possible. Or the next 10 seagulls were brown. Right? It goes into the distinction between weak and strong induction, but it's irrelevant at this point. What we need to understand is, you're limited and it's possible there's room for error. This is the key point to understand. There is always room for error based on your conclusions. This is why science does not deal with facts. Right? If anyone says, for example, as Richard Dawkins says, and he's tweeted about this many times, he says, evolution is a fact. If you don't believe in it, you're an idiot. Right? This is ridiculous. Him claiming such a thing makes him an idiot. Right? Don't mind my rhetoric, but the point is that it's important to emphasize this. It's ridiculous, especially an academic like him, just to claim that there are facts in science is ridiculous. Right? Whenever scientists do use the term facts loosely or truth in science, it's always with a small t or a small f. Right? Because there's always room for error. Just based on induction alone. You cannot have absolute facts coming from science. If that was the case, you wouldn't have theories. You'd have facts. That's it. Right? But we see the nature of science is you have a theory. Over time, the theory is revised, more data is collected, more experimentation is done. The theory changes, the theory is added to. We've seen U-turns in science all the time. Paradigm shifts happen, right? Even in the theory of evolution, I know the way it's, and we're doing some amazing research on this. There will be a book, and so not a shameless plug. There'll be some research that's coming out by Ira, a book on evolution, which will be very interesting to read. Brother Saladin will probably give you some information on this at the end. But the point being, when you look into it and you study the subject, what you see is that there's infighting, there's disagreements amongst the experts. These are the experts amongst the field of evolutionary science. They don't agree on the same theory. They're not all unanimous on the Darwinian theory of evolution. You know, most of these experts, they say, well, there's no tree of life, there's a bush of life. Yeah? Things don't add up. There's many discrepancies, there's many things that need to be accounted for, so on and so forth. There's disagreement amongst the experts. Right? This is the key thing to understand. Why? Because it's the nature of science. Science does not give you facts. Science gives you inferences, infers based on the limited data, and there's chances or there's room for error. It's possible that data can be broken down, the data can be refuted, the theory can be changed, and so on and so forth. Right? Everyone okay with this so far? Yeah? Okay, good. Next point. The how, actually, before we move into how and why, before I completely go off tangent, one point leading on to induction. Now, one idea that we see, another idea that we see prevalent is whenever you speak to an individual who's an atheist who wants to discuss God's existence with you, they normally ask for what? They ask for evidence, right? Okay? And normally the evidence they ask for, they always want some sort of empirical evidence, right? Something tangible. It's very common. But one thing we need to understand, when you understand the nature and the limited nature of science itself, you realize that science can't give you certainty anyway, right? So if it's certainty they're after, it's not going to be via the empirical method. Even if, that's arguing, if you can have direct observations for God. If you could, hypothetically speaking for a moment, if you can have direct observations for God's existence, that will still, look at the irony, that will still not give you certainty in God's existence. So is that the right question we should be asking in the first place? No. But I'm not saying that, like I said, you cannot have direct evidence for God's existence. It's impossible. So moving on to the how and why. And this is another really interesting point that's played on based on our ignorance of this subject, right? Science gives us explanations, right? Of explanation-seeking questions, basically, right? Science gives us one type of explanation, okay? It gives us the how, if you like, type of explanation, not the why type of explanation. It is something we really need to understand. Because one of the claims that's made in when God's put up against science is, science tells us how things work, yeah? Therefore, we don't need God anymore to explain things, right? But here's something interesting. Science tells us the how. Science isn't telling us the why of these realities. Let me give you a simple analogy to start putting things into perspective. Imagine your aunt's just come back from abroad, and you've gone to university, and because she's missed you so much, and she's a good baker, she bakes you a cake. Yeah? Nice chocolate cake. For the Pakistanis amongst us, she makes you some samosas, yeah? Some nice, big, juicy samosas, yeah? You come home, you see a huge plate of samosas, and you see a letter next to the samosas, right? And it says, you know, so-and-so, I've missed you, here's a little gift from me because I missed you, and because I love you, and so on and so forth, yeah? Now, what you do, instead of eating the samosas, because you recently, you know, got access to a lab at your university, you think, you know what, I'm not going to eat these. To show my appreciation to Mal, I'm going to take these samosas and give them to my lab technician. You go to your lab technician, you give him the samosas, you give him the cake, or her the cake, and you ask them, tell me everything you can about this cake, or these samosas. Everything you can. And you say, you know what, take as long as you want. The scientist gets back to you, or your lab technician gets back to you after a week, and he gives you a nice long breakdown, a huge list, yeah? And he tells you everything. He tells you what temperature the samosas or the cake was baked at, how many calories in the samosas and cake, what are the raw ingredients, how old the raw ingredients were, how many ingredients there were, and he lists all of these physical properties, right? All of the hows of the cake, right? But now here's the important question. Can he tell you who baked the cake and why the cake was baked? Can he tell you this information? No, because it's beyond the scope of science. The question of why the cake was baked in this case, or the samosas were baked, or who baked them, is beyond the scope of science. He could tell you the how question, the physical makeup and the properties. He can't tell you the why question, right? Now, does this mean there is no why? Just because he can't tell you who made the cake or why it was made, does this therefore mean it logically follows that he should conclude no one baked the cake and there was no reason the cake was baked? Does that logically follow? No, of course not, right? The rational thing to do at this point is realize he's limited to the type of explanation he can provide, and you have the other knowledge, the why, right? So science gives us the how, it doesn't give us the why. It can maybe tell us how rain clouds form, right? Science can probably tell us how lightning strikes and how the mechanics of it and how it works, but it can't tell us why, or what is in control of these processes, what puts these processes into motion in the first place. It doesn't have a foot in the door when it comes to these questions. Is everyone clear with these things? And this is a very subtle, nuanced point. And many individuals, based on our ignorance on these facts, they play with these. They mix the two, right? In the same way, we have a camera here, right? Just another analogy. Why is the camera recording? Someone tell me why the camera is recording.
Our YouTube page.
Okay, for our YouTube page. Okay. Any others? Sorry, brother, you just say something? Reference. Okay, anything else? Can't hear you, bro. Someone press record. Okay, different types of explanations. The brother said YouTube page, so we're documenting this, we're having it as for our YouTube page and so on. That's one type of explanation. The other type of explanation is, there's a battery in the camera is constructed to record, it has a memory card, SD card put into it, and someone press the record button. Two different levels of explanation, right? Both have their place. Just because you have one doesn't mean you deny the other one, because you can't deal with the other one. Is everyone okay with this concept of how and why? Okay, good. Next point. moving on, is, and I believe this is something we need to really understand now. Understanding the nature of science, understanding its limits to what's observable, it has a scope and we use it for what it's good for, understanding the nature of God. What I want to do is change the narrative, or at least try to get you guys thinking of another way of seeing these realities, the reality of God in science, right? There's many things that go unaccounted for, right? This is, I believe, a problem for naturalism or atheism, that you cannot account for many realities. Many things in the physical world, in our reality, don't make sense. Science has many things it's based on and so on and so forth, but two things, I'm going to talk about two things now. Two crucial things science requires is a rational mind that can attain truth. Okay? So, the scientist. Someone who does the science. Okay? And it also requires an intelligible universe. Now, what do I mean by intelligible universe? When I say intelligible universe, I mean a universe which is ordered, a universe that's uniform, that we can understand, that doesn't just change at random, is governed by distinctive laws. Okay? We have both of these things. We have rational minds which understand and can account for truth, and we have an intelligible universe. Okay? Both of these things, I would argue, cannot be accounted for on atheism or naturalism. Now, let me just put a disclaimer out there. I'm not saying atheists or naturalists cannot do science, right? We can do science, but they cannot account for these things which are required to do science. Analogy being, you can drive a car even if you don't believe in engines. Yeah? You can drive a car home tonight. If you're driving back tonight, you can start to believe that there's no wheels on the car, but you're still driving the car, right? So atheists can drive the car of science, but they cannot account for it. Okay? Now, why is this? Let's think about this for a second. What do I mean by a rational mind that can acquire truth? Why is this a problem? Let me put it in a very simple way first. If we rewind the tape back of our existence and our universe and our reality, we go all the way back to the beginning, right? What scientists call the Big Bang, where everything began, everything started. Matter came into existence, time, space, all of these things. Everything, according to naturalism, let me just briefly define naturalism for you. When I say naturalism, it's the idea that everything is a closed physical system. There is nothing external outside of this physical system, no supernatural power, no God that's controlling or has put this system into motion. It's all random, okay? Now, according to naturalism and by extension atheism, in many cases, everything is a result of blind, random, non-rational, physical, dead processes. Think about this. Very, very simple reality to understand. Everything in the universe, including ourselves, everything that's developed over time, is a result, foundationally, of blind, random, non-rational, physical processes. Molecules whizzing around, colliding into each other at random without any intended purpose or future outcome. Gases whizzing around and just amalgamating with each other. Molecules attaching and detaching from each other and so on and so forth. All random, all blind, without any purpose. Now ask yourselves the question, using your rational mind, which has the ability to understand and acquire truth, how is it that we have ended up with rational minds which can understand truth and understand reality and do science and use logic and use mathematics, if they are the result of blind, random physical processes? Honestly, this is one of the most ridiculous things we have been made to believe in the 21st century. Foundational principles that go unaccounted for. Oh, this is realism. It just is. This is what we get. They just are. We just have rational minds, right? Or then evolution's born, which I'm going to discuss in a second. But just from this simple concept, thinking about this, blind, random, non-rational physical processes do not result in intelligent, rational, cognitive faculties, minds which understand and can acquire truth. It doesn't make sense. It's ridiculous. It's basically believing in magic. Hocus pocus, yeah? Literally. Not only this, now we have something unaccounted for in naturalism or atheism, the rational mind. Let's go to the other point, which was what? What was the second thing? There's two things I said science requires. The rational mind and an intelligible universe, mashallah. Yeah? Intelligible universe. Now, as I define the intelligible universe, a universe which is governed by laws, and we know a universe has physical laws, right? The laws of gravity, the laws of logic. It's mathematically coherent. Our universe is mathematical. Do you know the math? It's fascinating. We do mathematics, right? And we superimpose it onto the universe and it makes sense. The universe is ordered. it has laws that it follows. And what do laws necessitate? A legislator, right? A lawgiver. This is something amazing. And this is why we have the likes of individuals like Einstein, for example. He said, and these are his words, and he's considered a great genius by many, right? He's revered by scientists and philosophers alike. He said what is inconceivable, and listen to what he said. He said, what is inconceivable about the universe is that it is at all conceivable. Think about that for a second. He is saying what's mind-blowing in modern terms, yeah? What blows your mind, what doesn't make sense about the universe is that we can understand it. We can comprehend it. It's structured in a way which is comprehensible, understandable. It's crazy. It shouldn't be this way. There's no reason for it to be this way. It could have been otherwise. And this is something amazing. We have rational minds and intelligible universe. And what's even more fascinating to add to that, they overlap in a very unique way. Right? We're rational in a very particular sense, where we can understand mathematics and do maths, do science, engage in the sciences, look into the universe through the telescopes that we've designed and look at the galaxies, the Andromeda galaxy, and study and so on and so forth. We're rational in a very particular sense. Not like any other creatures. I mean, you don't see cockroaches sitting over coffee discussing quantum mechanics. You don't see it happen, yeah? And they survive. If we look at it from an evolutionary perspective, what is evolution from a very foundational perspective? What is it concerned with? Survival and reproduction. Evolution guided by natural selection is concerned with survival and reproduction. Animals around us, they survive fantastically. They survive in an amazing way. Cockroaches are known to survive in the most harshest conditions. They've been around for much longer than we have, right? But they don't have these abilities. They don't have the ability to understand mathematics or engage in science. They just can survive. Now someone may argue, well, we evolved in a different way. We evolved with rational minds because the rational mind helps in survival and aids in survival. Yes, I agree. It aids in us to a certain extent. But again, emphasizing the point, and John Barrow makes the same point. He says natural selection is not concerned with understanding the Andromeda galaxy or black holes. There's nothing, it's not concerned with that in any way, shape or form. Now some may argue, well, having true beliefs or having and I'm getting a bit technical, but I'm try to follow me along, we're almost done. Some may argue, well, having true beliefs is more beneficial, we need them for survival, basically, right? But that's not true. We can have false beliefs which also lead in survival. Let me give you one very simple one, fungus. Who knows what fungus is? Mushrooms, yeah? Now someone may believe all mushrooms are poisonous. They survive. But we know that's not a true belief. We know some mushrooms are not poisonous. We eat some mushrooms, yeah? Some people say mushrooms are good for the eyesight. I think the Prophet ﷺ, he also said that mushrooms are good for the sight. Yeah? So we know some mushrooms are good, but the person who believes all mushrooms are poisonous, he still survives. So false beliefs as well as true beliefs both can result in survival. If this is the case, then there is no need, and this is the crucial point here to understand, really try to follow this. If true beliefs as well as false beliefs can both result in survival, there is no need for those cognitive faculties which can lead us to truth to develop from the perspective of natural selection. There's no need. Right? Because remember, the process of natural selection is not concerned with additional luxuries. It's cutthroat. What's necessary, that develops. From this perspective, a cognitive mind which has the ability to retain truth and understand mathematics and engage in philosophy and do all of these things is not necessary. Right? So evolution cannot account for it. Doesn't make sense. Right? So to sum things up, now we have a little problem here, right? We have two realities which are absolutely fascinating, and to claim these two realities have arisen by chance out of blind random physical processes is an injustice to our own intellects. Right? And from the Islamic perspective, I would argue, we have a beautiful inference why we have these realities, why we have a rational mind, and why we have an intelligible universe. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God in the Quran, seldom does He try to prove His existence. Okay? You see in the Quran, hardly anywhere in the Quran does God try to prove His existence. There's one place in chapter 52, verse 35 and 36, where you can argue God is making a positive argument for God's existence. Other than that, nowhere in the Quran does God try to prove His existence. Instead, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does is He takes us from His existence to His worship. Yeah? This is the key. One of the key purposes of the Quran is to take us from God's existence to His worship. Okay? It's something we need to really understand. And one of the strategies that God employs is He points us towards His creation. Okay? For example, in the 3rd chapter of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation, the change of the night and day, in it are signs for those people of understanding. Okay? two things. Something's been implied here. People of understanding. God continuously tells us also in the Quran, do you not reflect, do you not think? Implying that we've been given faculties to reason and to think, and we need to start using them in the correct way. Also, God points us towards His physical creation. God says, for example, do you not see the camels and how they're created? In other words, God is telling us to do what? Engage in science. Right? This is what God is telling us to do. What we call science today, observe. Do observations. Why? Because when you observe the physical universe and this reality, it leads you to the worship of God. Because you see the magnificence of the universe. Not only this, you see that you have the ability to understand and comprehend these things. Anyone that does mathematics or science, when you solve a hard equation, you're happy, you get excited. Yeah? When you discover something, you're really excited. And this is a mercy from God. Science, I would argue, is a blessing from God because it leads us to His worship. And only through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can we account for this reality. We can still do it, but the only way we can really account for it is through the understanding through the Quran itself and through what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God tells us Himself. And it's fascinating. And you know what? This highlights the mercy of God. Because think about what we are. We're an insignificant speck on an insignificant blue dot. I think Carl Sagan, he had on a cover of one of his novels or books, he had the picture of the Earth taken, I think, by, I don't know what satellite it was, but it was taken of the Earth. It was a small blue dot, right, in the middle of this vastness of darkness of space, yeah? Think about this. We're an insignificant creature on an insignificant planet, in an insignificant galaxy amongst all these millions of galaxies. Some atheists use this as an argument, oh, look how waste of space. I don't see it as a waste of space. This is majesty. And this is showing us, look how insignificant you are. You're this dot, insignificant dot, yet God's made you rational and given you the ability to understand this universe. So you can appreciate Him and worship Him. Allahu Akbar. This is something profound. This is something beautiful. It's something amazing. It's something we need to really think about. And I'll leave you with this. And the last thing I want to say to you guys, inshallah, before we open up the Q&A, is that as Muslims, and as well as non-Muslims, we need to really start understanding these realities, understanding the differences between, or the realities of science and Islam, how they connect with each other. Because the Quran, in fact, encourages people to do science, as we've just seen. Encourages you to observe the reality. The Prophet ﷺ, in his narrations, he said that every disease, God has not created a disease except that He's put a cure for it. I'm paraphrasing. That He's created a cure for it. Think about the psychological state that puts a Muslim in when he engages in the sciences. He doesn't approach science with this idea that maybe there's a cure. Maybe I'll find something. Although I'm just going to be worm buffet one day and I'm going to end up under the grave and there's nothing beyond there, I shall still engage in science and maybe there's a cure. He doesn't approach it with a sort of disheartened, empty approach. He approaches it knowing that if he engages in the science and engages in finding cures for others, it's a form of worship. It's a form of worship for him and he can attain reward for it. He engages it enthusiastically because he knows there's a cure. It's just a case of him looking for it. Right? And the link between science and Islam is very deep. Time doesn't permit us to go into too much detail, but the link is very, very deep, and I encourage us to study it and really try to counter this narrative that's out there. Because the narrative is growing, and the problem isn't with narratives growing, but we have to, as Muslims, at least challenge false narratives, because our duty as Muslims is to convey the truth, and especially if it's misconstruing Islam, right? If it's been thrown up against Islam and the argument's been made, Islam is backwards, Islam has nothing positive to offer, it's counter-discourse, it's counter-intellectual discussion and dialogue, it stops people from engaging and developing. These are the sort of narratives that are out there. I mean, only recently, we had, I don't know if you guys have heard of Professor Hoodboy, Pervez Hoodboy from Pakistan. He published a article in the Dawn magazine, one of the leading magazines in Pakistan. And he, cutting a long story short, the main point, one of the points that really alarmed me, he said, having lectures on topics such as religion and religious concepts within educational institutions is counterproductive to the intellect. The intellects will degrade. This is the sort of ideas that are out there. Right? And this is Pakistan. So we need to start engaging with people and really start sharing the truth about science in Islam, how they interweave each other, how they overlap each other, what the relationship between them is, and show that if anything, you want to do the best science you can, you want to have the best scientists you can, you have to look at it, and I sincerely would argue, you have to look at it through the prism of Islam to really account for science and use it to its best potential and its best ability. Jazakallah khair for listening. May Allah bless you guys. We'll open up the Q&A.